Emily Scott thought she had the perfect life with her charming boyfriend, Daniel Harper, but when she uncovered his secret love affair with his best friend Jason Myers, her world collapsed. What began as betrayal soon spiraled into a storm of obsession, revenge, and a brutal murder that left one man dead, another haunted, and a quiet town shocked by the twisted truth hidden behind closed doors. Emily Scott lived in the quiet suburb of Fairview, a place where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. The houses were close enough to create a sense of community, but far enough apart for secrets to hide. At just 24, Emily was considered mature beyond her years. She balanced her nursing school schedule with weekend shifts at a local hospital and still made time for her boyfriend, Daniel Harper. To everyone who knew her, she was kind, reliable, and deeply in love. Daniel, 26, was a gym trainer known for his friendly nature and toned physique. Together, they seemed perfect, Instagram-worthy even. Emily's friends often said she had won the lottery with Daniel. He was attentive, supportive, and present. He celebrated her small victories, drove her to late-night classes, and brought her coffee during her long study hours. People envied what they had, but very few looked past the smiles and hand-holding. And even fewer noticed the cracks forming beneath the surface. Daniel and Emily had been dating for over 2 years. They met through a mutual friend at a New Year's Eve party, instantly clicking over their shared love for fitness and cheesy horror films. Their relationship moved quickly. Within months, they were spending nearly every night together. Emily's parents adored Daniel. He attended family dinners, helped her dad with repairs, and even took her younger brother to football games. He became part of her world. But what Emily didn't know was that Daniel was hiding a side of himself she had never seen and never would have imagined. Daniel's best friend, Jason Myers, had always been in the background of their relationship. Jason was quiet, nerdy, and worked as a software developer for a tech company downtown. He was the type of guy who rarely made eye contact and preferred texting over talking. Emily thought he was harmless, just a socially awkward friend who liked video games and stayed out of everyone else's way. Whenever she and Daniel had a date night, Jason would often tag along. At first, she found it odd, but Daniel assured her Jason was just lonely and needed company. So she accepted it, not thinking much of it. Over time, Emily noticed how close Daniel and Jason really were. They had inside jokes she didn't understand, late-night conversations that ended in laughter, and long workouts together at the gym that lasted hours. Once, she saw them exchange a glance that didn't look friendly, it looked intense, private. When she asked Daniel about it, he brushed it off, saying she was reading into things. She believed him. She had no reason not to. Emily's world revolved around Daniel. She told herself that he was just a loyal friend trying to support someone who didn't have many people. She reminded herself how good he was to her. And for a long time that was enough. But as their relationship matured, certain things started to feel off. Daniel became more distant, less physically affectionate, more distracted. His phone was always on silent, and he grew nervous when she touched it. He no longer talked about the future like he used to. Plans of moving in together were put on hold, then forgotten entirely. Despite all this, Emily clung to the belief that they were solid. They still had date nights, still said, "I love you," still presented themselves as the perfect couple. On social media, their relationship was alive and glowing. But behind closed doors, the energy had shifted. Emily began to sense that she was living in a performance, playing the role of a girlfriend in a show someone else was directing. It was during one of their gym sessions that things began to tip. Daniel had left his phone unlocked on the bench. A message from Jason popped up. It wasn't just a meme or a casual, "What's up?" It was a photo, Daniel's photo sent back to him with a heart emoji and the caption, "Missed this already." Emily's chest tightened. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. She took a screenshot, emailed it to herself, and put the phone back. For days, she told herself it didn't mean anything. Maybe it was just a joke between friends. Maybe Jason had sent it by mistake. She confronted Daniel lightly, asking if there was anything he wanted to tell her. He smiled and kissed her forehead, telling her she was being paranoid. But the doubt took root, and once it did, it grew fast. She began checking his location through their shared app. He'd often claim he was working late or at the gym, but the location told a different story. More often than not, he was near Jason's apartment. Emily started tracking patterns. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Daniel spent long evenings in the same spot. She began to catalog the times, the excuses, the silence. Then she noticed that Daniel's mood shifted after those visits. He would come home either more relaxed or strangely irritable. She couldn't make sense of it, but something felt wrong deeply, fundamentally wrong. The tipping point came on a Saturday afternoon when Daniel left for what he called a business meeting with a new client. Curious, Emily waited an hour and checked the tracker. He was at Jason's building again. She got in her car and drove there, parking across the street. She waited. An hour passed. Then two. Finally, Daniel emerged, adjusting his shirt, his face calm and oddly satisfied. Emily stayed out of sight, watching him get into his car and drive away. Her mind was on fire. The evidence was stacking up, but it was incomplete. She needed more. That night, Emily made a decision. She would not confront Daniel yet. She would gather everything, photos, videos, texts, anything that could confirm what she now feared. This wasn't just a case of cheating. This was something else. Something far more unexpected. She went to bed with her back turned to him while Daniel fell asleep next to her, unaware that the girl he thought he had fooled was already 10 steps ahead. Her heart was broken, but her mind was clear. She was going to get to the truth, no matter what it took. Daniel's double life didn't begin with an intention to deceive. It started with confusion, loneliness, and a friendship that crossed an invisible line. His bond with Jason had always been close, maybe too close. They had grown up together, survived high school awkwardness, and helped each other through their worst breakups. But about a year ago, things had shifted. After a night of drinking and vulnerability, they had ended up sharing more than just words. A line was crossed, and instead of retreating from it, they crossed it again and again. What was supposed to be a one-time mistake turned into secret meetings and emotional dependency. Daniel didn't see himself as gay. He wasn't ready to label anything. But with Jason, he felt seen in a way he hadn't with anyone. It wasn't just physical. It was quiet understanding, shared silences, and a connection he couldn't explain. Still, Daniel was terrified. He feared what people would say, how his family would react, what it would do to his job, and most of all, what Emily would think. So he did what he thought was safest. He hid it. He kept Emily in the picture because he genuinely cared about her. Maybe not in the same way he used to, but enough to not want to hurt her. Jason, on the other hand, had no one else. He had carried feelings for Daniel for years and had finally been pulled into his orbit. But being the secret lover took a toll. Jason wanted more. He wanted real recognition, affection without fear, and weekends that didn't have to end in lies. But Daniel wasn't ready to give that to him. Every time Jason pushed for clarity, Daniel pulled away. The affair became a cycle of passion, guilt, arguments, and silence. Emily, meanwhile, had transformed from a doting girlfriend to an investigator. She started collecting evidence, screenshotting messages, tracking locations, and piecing together a picture that shattered everything she believed in. She still hadn't told anyone. She was ashamed, confused, and unsure of what to do. Her instinct was to protect Daniel's secret, even while it broke her heart. She told herself maybe it was just a phase, maybe it would end, but the more she watched, the clearer it became. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a full-blown emotional and physical affair, one that was happening right under her nose. One night, while Daniel was asleep, Emily unlocked his phone using facial recognition. She scrolled through his deleted photos and found selfies with Jason smiling, shirtless in bed. There were saved voice notes too, filled with soft laughter and whispered affection. She listened to every second, numb and silent. That was the moment her sadness turned to rage. Not just because he had cheated, but because he had created an entirely separate world with someone else. Someone he had told her was just a lonely friend. The more she learned, the more Emily began to view their entire relationship as a lie. Every date, every anniversary, every photo they'd taken together now seemed fake. Her life had become a performance to hide the truth Daniel refused to speak aloud. She couldn't understand how he could hold her hand in public while sneaking off to Jason S.'s apartment at night. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was psychological. She had been made into a shield, a cover, a convenient mask for someone else's secret life. Jason, too, was spiraling. His feelings for Daniel had intensified, but the secrecy was tearing him apart. He started becoming reckless, texting Daniel at odd hours, sending him gifts even when he knew Emily was around, posting vague emotional messages online. He wanted to be seen, even if it risked everything, and that risk was growing. Emily had started following Jason on social media, digging through his old posts, looking for connections. She noticed subtle details, reflections in mirrors, extra plates in food photos, familiar shirts that weren't his. She was connecting the dots faster than they realized. Then came the night that changed everything. Emily staged a fake trip to visit her cousin in another city. She packed a bag, said goodbye, and even took a bus downtown. But instead of leaving, she circled back, using a rideshare to return without anyone noticing. She waited outside Jason's building in a borrowed hoodie and dark sunglasses, hiding in plain sight. Just past midnight, Daniel arrived, looking around nervously before letting himself in with a spare key. He didn't know Emily was watching from across the street. She stayed until dawn, camera in hand, recording them leaving together the next morning. When Daniel finally came home, she pretended to be groggy and asked how his night shift had gone. He lied again, calmly, easily. That lie was the last piece she needed. Emily no longer had doubts, only fury. But she didn't confront him. Not yet. She wanted both of them to feel the tension building, to sense that something was coming, even if they didn't know what. Over the next few days, she acted normal. Sweet texts, casual kisses, fake laughter at dinner. Daniel was relieved, thinking the danger had passed. Jason was more cautious, begging Daniel to end things with Emily before it got worse. He was tired of hiding, he wanted more. But Daniel, caught in the middle, made promises he didn't keep. Emily, meanwhile, was preparing. She printed screenshots, edited video clips, backed up files, and labeled everything. She stored it all in a folder called Truth on a hidden drive. She played out different scenarios in her head: confrontation, exposure, revenge. She didn't know what she would do with the truth. She just knew she had to hold it until the perfect moment. Not out of curiosity anymore, but out of cold, calculated resolve. Her heart had turned to stone. Whatever love she once had for Daniel had been replaced with a sense of betrayal so deep it didn't allow for tears. She had invested years into a relationship built on lies. Her future, her dreams, her stability shattered overnight by two people she trusted the most. And though she hadn't spoken a word of it yet, a storm was coming. One that neither Daniel nor Jason would see until it was too late. Emily's decision to act came swiftly, like the snapping of a thread stretched too tight. Her heart no longer weighed down by hope. She focused instead on precision. Every move had to be planned, calculated, and emotionally distant. She wasn't interested in crying or begging or forgiving. She wanted them to feel the impact of their betrayal as forcefully as she had. But to do that, she needed the perfect stage. She invited Daniel and Jason over for dinner on a Thursday night. Nothing about the invitation seemed out of place. Emily played her part flawlessly, sweet, apologetic, even lighthearted. She told Daniel she wanted to reconnect and told Jason she had something important to share. Her tone was calm, measured. Neither man suspected anything. They assumed she was finally softening, that perhaps she had sensed something and chosen to ignore it for the sake of peace. They had no idea that she had already seen everything. No idea that the evening was a trap. The house was spotless that evening. Candles lit, wine chilled, soft music playing. Emily wore a casual sundress and a relaxed smile. When Jason arrived first, he brought flowers. A gesture that made Emily's stomach twist with bitterness. Moments later, Daniel walked in, dressed like he always did for date night, neat, effortless, and oblivious. Emily welcomed them both with such warmth that neither could detect the pressure hiding just beneath her skin. Dinner was quiet at first. Emily served the meal, poured drinks, asked about work, and laughed at all the right moments. But beneath the surface, the air grew heavier by the minute. Jason looked uncomfortable. He kept shifting in his seat, stealing glances at Daniel. Daniel seemed tense too, though he tried to hide it behind forced smiles. They sensed something was coming but didn't know when or how. Halfway through dessert, Emily left the table and returned with her laptop. She placed it in front of them and opened the folder labeled Truth. She didn't speak as the files loaded. She simply hit play. The screen flickered to life with a series of images, screenshots of texts, location logs, deleted photos, voice notes. Then came the final video, the one taken from across the street. It showed Daniel entering Jason's apartment late at night. A few hours later, both men emerged together, relaxed and close. Emily didn't flinch as the video ended. She didn't yell or cry. She just looked at them, her face unreadable. The room was dead silent. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. Jason stared at the floor. The shock was instant and total. Neither had expected the level of evidence. Neither had expected her to uncover it all. Daniel tried to speak, but his words collapsed into silence. Emily stood and walked to the kitchen, pouring herself another glass of wine. The air in the room felt electric dangerous. Jason whispered something to Daniel, who looked frozen in place. Emily returned and, without warning, calmly began to speak. She listed every detail she had uncovered. The nights they had spent together, the lies she had been told, the gifts exchanged behind her back. Her voice didn't rise, but every word landed like a punch. Then she dropped the final blow. She told them she had already sent the entire folder to multiple email addresses, friends, family, and even Daniel's workplace. There was no undoing it now. Everyone would know. Daniel's reputation, Jason's privacy, her own pain—it was all now public property. The humiliation would be shared, and it would be permanent. Jason stood up suddenly, his face pale. He accused her of trying to ruin lives. Emily didn't respond. She just sat back down and sipped her wine. Daniel tried to mediate, asking her to reconsider. He pleaded not for forgiveness, but for control. But it was too late for control. Emily had already handed the truth to the world, and she watched as it began to burn. Jason stormed out first, slamming the door behind him. Daniel stayed behind, begging Emily to take it all back. But she sat in silence, staring at him until he gave up and left. The door clicked shut. She was finally alone. In the days that followed, the fallout began. Daniel lost clients at the gym. People whispered, and his inbox filled with questions he didn't want to answer. Jason's social media accounts vanished overnight. Friends distanced themselves. Family members called in confusion, some in support, others in anger. Emily remained quiet through it all. She ignored the messages, the questions, the judgment. Her only comfort was that they now understood what she had been forced to endure. But something inside Emily didn't feel better. It didn't feel satisfying or victorious. It felt unfinished. The humiliation she inflicted hadn't filled the hole left behind by betrayal. She had exposed them, but still felt empty. Jason's face, pale and panicked as he left her home, lingered in her mind like a ghost. Daniel's desperate pleas echoed in her ears even as she tried to shut them out. The damage had been done, but her rage hadn't dissolved. It had simply changed shape. What none of them knew was that Jason had started spiraling after the dinner. He stopped going to work. He didn't return calls. He stayed locked inside his apartment for days, drinking heavily and pacing the same path through his living room over and over. The man who once wanted love now felt like he had been exposed and discarded. He blamed Daniel for everything, for using him, for lying, for never choosing him. He blamed Emily for the public shame and the emotional ambush. Most of all, he blamed himself for believing it had ever been real. Daniel tried to reach out to Jason but got no response. He knocked on his door. He left messages, nothing. He called Emily, asking if she had heard from him. She hadn't. She didn't care, but deep down, Jason was planning something. Not to make amends, not to fix anything, but to be heard, to be remembered, to make sure they never forgot what they had done to him. Inside that quiet apartment, Jason made a choice that would unravel everything in ways neither Emily nor Daniel could imagine. And when it happened, it would be far too late to stop. The morning Jason's neighbor called the police. The building already smelled like something was wrong. It was a low, foul odor that crept under doorways and clung to the walls. The neighbor had knocked several times over the past 2 days, concerned by the strange silence. Jason's TV was on constantly at full volume, but there was no movement, no signs of life. When the authorities forced the door open, the scene they discovered was far worse than anyone could have expected. Jason Myers was found lying in the middle of his living room floor, surrounded by broken glass, scattered prescription bottles, and dried pools of blood. He had been stabbed repeatedly 16 times to the chest and neck. His face was partially covered by a throw pillow soaked in dark red. It wasn't a clean crime scene. It was messy, brutal, almost frenzied. The apartment had been ransacked, cabinets left open, drawers pulled out, framed pictures smashed on the floor. And yet no items of real value appeared to be stolen. His wallet and phone were still present. There was no forced entry. Detectives arrived within the hour and quickly ruled out the possibility of a random break-in. Whoever had done this knew Jason, knew where he lived, knew how to get inside. The security camera in the lobby had malfunctioned 2 nights earlier, offering no visual clues about visitors. But one thing was certain: Jason had been targeted. This wasn't just a murder. It was personal, emotional, rage-driven, news spread fast. Within hours, Emily heard about it from a friend who had seen the breaking news alert online. At first, she thought it was a sick joke. But as she refreshed her feed and saw the photo of Jason S.'s apartment building on multiple headlines, reality set in. Her stomach dropped, her heart pounded. She sat frozen at her desk for minutes, unable to move. Even though she hated him for what he had done, even though she had wanted him exposed, she never imagined he would end up dead. And yet, part of her had sensed something was coming, just not like this. Daniel found out at the gym. One of his clients showed him the headline: "Local tech developer found stabbed in brutal attack, police investigating." He stared at the screen in disbelief, then his legs gave out. He didn't say a word. He just walked out, got in his car, and drove straight to the crime scene. By the time he arrived, the area was taped off. Officers were still gathering evidence. Paramedics had already taken the body away. A crowd of onlookers had gathered, whispering and speculating. Daniel stood there, hands shaking, head pounding, until a detective pulled him aside for questioning. Detective Karen Holt was assigned to lead the investigation. She was methodical, seasoned, and had a sharp instinct for reading people. She questioned Daniel calmly but thoroughly. He admitted he had been close to Jason, but insisted he hadn't seen or spoken to him in the past few days. He said he'd tried calling after the dinner at Emily S.'s house, but received no answer. His story checked out, at least on the surface. But Detective Holt wasn't satisfied. The murder was too intense, too emotional. She suspected jealousy, revenge, or both. And Daniel was at the center of a triangle that had already cracked wide open. Emily was called in for questioning the next day. She wore a plain black sweater, no makeup, her expression unreadable. She answered everything truthfully: how she had discovered the affair, how she had set up the confrontation, how she had exposed both men afterward. She admitted sending out the evidence, but denied any contact with Jason since that night. The detectives noted her calm demeanor. There were no visible signs of grief, no anger, no guilt, just quiet detachment. As the investigation continued, more details emerged. Jason's laptop was recovered and analyzed. His search history painted a picture of someone spiraling queries about depression, articles on Heartbreak, and, disturbingly, instructions for hiding evidence and wiping fingerprints. But nowhere in the files did Jason hint at fear of being attacked. There were no threatening messages, no strange emails. In fact, his last known communication was a brief text to Daniel saying, "We need to talk soon." Detectives began canvassing the building for more surveillance footage. Though the lobby camera was down, a neighboring building's camera had partial coverage of the entrance. The footage revealed something shocking. On the night of Jason's murder, a figure wearing a dark hoodie and gloves entered the building at around 11:43 p.m. The person's face was never fully visible, but the build, height, and posture resembled a woman. The figure stayed inside for just under an hour before leaving, calm, unhurried, head down. The time of the visit matched the estimated time of death based on Jason's autopsy. When the footage was shown to Emily during a follow-up interview, her expression didn't change. She stared at the screen and said she didn't recognize the person, but the resemblance was there. Detectives couldn't confirm it was her, but they couldn't rule her out either. The problem was, there was no physical evidence directly linking her to the crime scene. No fingerprints, no hair, no fibers. Whoever committed the murder had been careful, painfully so. Daniel, on the other hand, had been in Jason's apartment many times. His fingerprints were everywhere. So were his clothes in Jason's bedroom, but he had an alibi. Security footage showed him at a nearby 24-hour gym at the time of the murder. He even signed in with his ID and was caught on camera entering and leaving. Though it didn't rule him out completely, it weakened the case against him. With two central figures and no solid proof against either, detectives found themselves stuck. They needed something that would tip the scale. That's when they discovered a hidden camera in Jason's hallway mirror. Installed during a paranoid phase a few months back, it had recorded all motion near the front door and living room. It had a wide-angle lens, but was placed at an angle that left parts of the footage in shadow. As analysts reviewed the files from that night, they found a clip where the murderer entered the apartment. The figure's face remained out of frame, but the voice was captured, muffled, but present. A single sentence, "You think you can ruin me and just walk away?" It was a woman's voice, cold, controlled, and it sent a chill through everyone who heard it. Police brought Emily in again. This time, they asked her to speak a series of phrases, including the one from the recording. A forensic audio specialist compared the samples. The result wasn't 100% conclusive, but it was close. Strong enough to warrant a deeper look. By now, Emily had become the prime suspect. The problem was, the evidence was circumstantial. Without a murder weapon, a clear witness, or forensic proof, there was no arrest. Yet still, the cloud of suspicion around her grew heavier. Her classmates whispered her hospital shifts were suspended. She walked through town like a ghost, no longer sure who was watching or who believed she was innocent. Daniel, torn between grief and guilt, began to unravel. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He kept replaying every moment between him and Jason, wondering if he could have stopped it. His shame was a weight he couldn't shake. He didn't know if Emily had done it. He didn't even know if he wanted to find out. All he knew was that his lies had detonated something far bigger than he ever imagined. And somewhere in the shadows of the investigation, a quiet truth remained: Jason was gone, brutally murdered, and someone among them knew exactly how and why. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Media vans lined the streets, their antennas reaching skyward like hungry fingers. Reporters shouted over each other, cameras flashing every time the courthouse doors opened. The small town of Fairview had never seen a case like this, a love triangle drenched in betrayal, a secret affair that had ended in savage bloodshed, and a woman now sitting on trial for the most grisly murder in recent memory. Emily Scott entered the courtroom quietly, dressed in a modest gray blazer and black slacks. Her expression was unreadable. No tears, no visible anger, just silence. The woman once described by neighbors as the sweet girl next door now looked like a shadow of herself. Her eyes were sunken, her posture stiff, her gaze unfocused. The world had turned its attention toward her, and she bore it with eerie calm. The prosecution opened with intensity. They painted Emily as a woman scorned, a calculating and cold individual who had planned every step of her revenge. They spoke of the evidence she had gathered, the confrontation she had orchestrated, and the rage that followed. They highlighted her motive, the humiliation she endured, and her meticulous exposure of the affair. And then they played the grainy audio recording from Jason S. hidden hallway mirror those 7 words delivered in a female voice that eerily matched her own. "You think you can ruin me and just walk away?" The jury listened in silence. That sentence became the spine of the prosecution's argument. They argued that no one else had motive like Emily. Daniel was exposed, yes, but Jason was the one who had humiliated her, taken something from her she could never get back. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a public dismantling of her identity, her trust, her life. The defense, however, pushed back with their own strategy. They focused on the lack of physical evidence: no fingerprints, no weapon, no eyewitnesses. They emphasized the unreliability of the voice analysis, calling it circumstantial and flawed. Most of all, they painted a picture of a woman emotionally broken, not murderous. They said Emily had suffered immense psychological trauma and had isolated herself after the discovery of Daniel's secret life. They showed text messages where she begged Daniel to tell the truth and emails to friends expressing heartbreak, not hatred. Daniel was called to the stand midway through the trial. His appearance caused a stir. He looked nothing like the polished man seen in social media photos. He was pale, gaunt, and visibly uncomfortable. He spoke softly, acknowledging the affair, admitting the deception, and taking responsibility for the emotional damage caused. He told the court he had no idea Jason would end up dead and no reason to believe Emily would resort to violence. But under cross-examination, the prosecution cornered him. They asked why he hadn't gone to police when Jason stopped responding to messages. Why he hadn't told investigators about the emotional volatility Emily had displayed during their final dinner. Why, despite everything, he didn't seem shocked when Jason was murdered. Daniel fumbled, his voice cracking, sweat beading on his forehead. The jury watched, noting every stutter, every glance toward Emily. He was a man drowning in guilt, but not necessarily lying. His testimony helped neither side completely. It only added to the storm of ambiguity. Then came the forensic psychologist. The prosecution brought her in to describe the mental profile of the killer. According to her analysis, the murder was emotionally charged and executed with personal intensity. 16 stab wounds, each one deliberate. Not an act of panic or fear, but of rage and release. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was vengeance. The psychologist pointed out that crimes like this often stemmed from deep betrayal, unprocessed grief, and suppressed anger, all of which matched Emily's situation. The defense countered with their own expert, arguing that such analysis was speculative and not rooted in hard data. They pointed to the clean disappearance of the murder weapon and the attacker's careful avoidance of forensic evidence as signs of a more calculated individual, someone who may have wanted to frame Emily while masking their own involvement. As the trial stretched into its third week, public opinion swayed wildly. Some saw Emily as a victim pushed beyond her limits. Others believed she was a manipulator hiding behind her quiet demeanor. Online debates raged. News outlets ran side-by-side photos of her smiling with Daniel years ago and her cold, expressionless courtroom appearance. Narratives twisted, reformed, and clashed with every new testimony. Then, a surprise twist changed everything. One of Jason's neighbors came forward with a piece of overlooked information. A week before the murder, Jason had reportedly met with a man she didn't recognize. The man was tall, muscular, and appeared angry. She described him as someone who looked like a former client of Daniel's. Detectives scrambled to identify the man and eventually linked him to a disgruntled gym member who had been banned after a physical altercation with Daniel just months prior. That man, named Travis Boyd, had to record multiple counts of assault, several restraining orders, and a reputation for obsession. A background check revealed that Travis had followed Jason on social media and sent him hostile messages after the affair was made public. Though the messages were deleted, cached versions were recovered from Jason's laptop backups. The content was alarming threats, accusations, and talk of fixing what you broke. Travis was brought in for questioning, but he denied involvement. He had no alibi for the night of the murder. No witnesses. Still, he remained calm and insisted he had nothing to do with Jason's death. Investigators pressed hard but came up empty-handed. And yet, his presence cracked open a possibility the prosecution didn't want to explore, that someone else, someone enraged by Daniel's choices and Jason's role in it, had acted out of obsessive loyalty. In light of this new development, the jury deliberated for 5 days. When they returned, the courtroom went silent. The verdict was read, guilty of second-degree murder. Gasps filled the room. Emily did not react. She stood motionless as the words echoed through the chamber. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered. Some shouted her name in anger. Others held signs calling her a victim of betrayal. The debate didn't end with the verdict. It only deepened. Daniel disappeared from the public eye shortly after. He moved to another state, changed his name, and never gave another interview. Rumors followed him wherever he went, but he never corrected them. He lived quietly, his life haunted by a past he had helped create. Jason was buried in a small cemetery at the edge of town. His funeral was sparsely attended, a few colleagues, a distant cousin, and a mother who hadn't spoken to him in years. His grave remains unmarked by flowers, visited only by wind and memory. Emily's story became the subject of podcasts, documentaries, and social media debates. Some called her a cold-blooded killer. Others said she was a mirror of suppressed grief and invisible betrayal. But the truth, the full truth, remained elusive. Because in a triangle of secrets, lies, and passion, the line between victim and villain is never as clear as it seems. And sometimes even justice leaves behind questions it can't answer.